Hello. We are here today. We're very excited. This is our favorite topic to speak about. We'll be speaking today about dyslexia and self-esteem. We are hoping to be on for about 25 to 30 minutes. So if you do have a question for us, make sure you comment as soon as you can so we can try to get to as many questions or comments as possible. So if you have any hints and tips that you find have worked really well for you or for your child, let us know so we can share them with people. But also if you have any specific questions for myself and Emma. I think you guys are used to seeing us now and chatting away to us, but maybe we'll just introduce ourselves very quickly.
Brilliant.
You go first, Emma. Okay.
Yeah. So my name is Emma McGee. I am the Senior Educational Psychologist here with Dyslexia Ireland. So my role is kind of half the time I do assessment for both children and adults, and the other half the time I would do kind of information talks for parents, workshops for kids, that type of thing. And then a couple of these amazing Facebook Live videos with Amy.
Yeah, of course.
So Amy,
we like
do you want
to keep you on your toes.
Absolutely.
My name is Amy. I am the Information and Advocacy Coordinator here with the Dyslexia Association, and I'm also dyslexic. So we have a 50-50 panel, 100% ginger and 50% dyslexic. So we've got our ratios really spot on today. So I think we felt it was really important to do a little bit on dyslexia and self-esteem, because I think sometimes there's so much focus, particularly for young people and children, about kind of getting their literacy level up and their like academic ability and how to cope in school and all that sort of stuff, that sometimes the self-esteem piece can take a backseat. And I think sometimes we don't necessarily look towards the self-esteem until it's become like a bigger issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we would often say is on that note, that it's not all about academics, and it is really, really important to maybe find an activity that your child excels in and really enjoys, with the aim of emphasizing that it is like academic achievement is not the be all and end all. It's not that, like, there's a lot of focus about it in school, and unfortunately there's a lot of because of exams and tests, it gives the perception that that is the most important thing, but actually there's lots of ways that a person can achieve in life. And so it is about finding that activity that they really love and they can excel in. And
there's lots of things, like, I mean, it could be that they love speech and drama or football or camogie, or, you know, it can be anything. It could be sports related. It can be kind of, even it can be like academic adjacent, like things like debating or public speaking. Dyslexic kids often really excel at, because again, they're kind of their verbal functioning and their word processing and all that is very good. And again, so it doesn't have to be completely separate. You should focus on what your child is maybe naturally leaning towards or has some natural ability in, and encourage that and say, listen, it's also a really, really good way to just challenge that negative thinking that can sometimes creep in. So things like, I'm never good at anything, I'm terrible at everything. And you can say, like, no, you're not. Like, you're playing under 11 soccer for your local club, and you're also going out and you're a really good artist too, and you're a really nice friend, and you're super kind to your brothers and sisters. So again, just rewarding really good personality traits too, like things like you're a lovely sibling. And that's, you're a kind person, you're so funny, you're so interested in other people, and rewarding those kind of behaviors is as important as rewarding a good, test result in history.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think as well, what you're saying there as well about, the language and nipping it in the bud is really, really important, because it's very easy for a child with dyslexia to think, I must be stupid, if all the time, their peers are being rewarded for how many spellings they got correct in the spelling test. So making sure that when they come home and they throw the bag on the ground and they're like, oh, I'm just no good at anything, that you are there to nip it in the bud and say, well, no, actually. And on that as well, just to be careful around the use of language and the types of words and language that you use, like things like even during the dyslexia assessment, and when your child is identified as having dyslexia, and when you talk, and we're going to talk a little bit about talking to your child about dyslexia, but even during that and before that, being careful about things like it's not about fixing your child, or it's not about we want the dyslexia to go away, or we want to make everything better, because that kind of shows that there's something wrong with it. Then, so it's not about fixing. It's
no, it's not about fixing. It's about making their life a little easier. It's their dyslexia is never going to go away. This is just as much of a part of who they are as the color of their eyes. So it's important to not alienate them from their dyslexia. They need to learn to, if not love their dyslexia, but certainly accept their dyslexia. They will learn to love it often as adults, but I think as a child, acceptance of it is really what you're aiming for. And I think it is really important that we're careful about our language and even our tone. I mean, I speak about my dyslexia all the time as part of my job, and people will often come up after me speaking for an hour and a half about my dyslexia and come up and say like, oh, my child is and they whispered at me. And I mean, we whisper things that we're embarrassed about, or that we're ashamed of, or are bad news. And dyslexia is none of those things. It's not something that you should be embarrassed about or ashamed of. And it's not bad news. It's different, and it can be very hard. But it's not something that is going to ruin your child's life forever. It can make things hard for certain periods of time, but it's definitely not something that will kind of really harm them in the long run. And often, we sometimes maybe don't speak about the really good positives that are associated with dyslexia. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about role models. But I think first, it's really important to go in a pattern. My dyslexia is wanting to make me go kind of from one end to the other, but I'm sticking to the pattern. And I suppose it's really good to talk about whether or not you should tell your child about their dyslexia, and while we totally acknowledge that that's fully a parental decision and your child best, I think that all of the research and all of our work with dyslexia, me would suggest that it's important that a child knows.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's one of the really common things a lot of parents would ask, should I tell them, or how do I tell them? And as Amy says, it is. We do think that it's really important to be honest. To be honest, they know that there's something different. They know they've been struggling in school. They've probably already put their own names and labels on themselves. They've already called themselves stupid, not able. Other people might have already, put labels on them that they're not trying hard enough. And so they know that there's something different. They're not like, they're well aware. And so we would say, well, dyslexia is really just a kind of label. It's relabeling.
And I think that we're in this strange area around labeling at the moment, where people say, you don't want to label your child and this, that and the other. But again, like, unfortunately, your child has probably labeled themselves and possibly been labeled by other people in terms of like careless or lazy, or we all have words that we associate with our dyslexia, and the kind of, I suppose, negative self-talk that we've done around dyslexia, and kids are no different. They also have that. But I think often, certainly I find, and the kids that we speak to find that dyslexia is almost a shield to that, in that, like, you can't be stupid, you're dyslexic. So you're not stupid. You're dyslexic, you're not lazy. You're dyslexic, you're not careless. And they can then also, I think, to be honest, and I think we maybe don't talk about the importance of it enough, but when you're dyslexic, you can speak to other dyslexic people. You can look up famous, inspirational dyslexics. You can, I suppose, find your tribe, which is so important in terms of literally being able to talk to someone else that understands what it's like, the frustration, the difficulty in school, the times where you just want to sit and have a cry. And I think that all of that is super, super important to be able to identify with another human being. And, that doesn't have to be face to face. That could be as simple as you sitting down with your child and talking to them about, some inspirational dyslexics or other dyslexic people in your family. I mean,
absolutely,
And I think that sometimes we talk a lot about, like, Richard Branson and things like that, but actually sometimes the most powerful people are dyslexic people that are related to that young person. So again, because we see the genetic component around dyslexia, it's likely that someone in your family may have dyslexia, and that conversation between a dad and his dyslexic daughter, or an aunt and their dyslexic nephew, is important too, because a child gets to look up to someone and say, well, my aunt is really cool, she has a cool job and she's very fun and lovely. And which I assume is what all of my nieces say about me and nephews. So, you know, things like that are really important, because they can identify and they get to see that there's a future past school, which can be very hard for them.
And it's not that, you know, the dyslexia, it's because of the dyslexia that has made them the multi-millionaire or the owner of Apple or whatever. It's that despite having dyslexia, they're still able to achieve. And I think that's really, really important. We'd often talk about, you know, ensuring that you are keeping those high standards for your child. Just in relation to kind of, I suppose, the language to use and what to say, I always think that talking about dyslexia as it's different. It's a different way of learning. It's a different way of your brain working. You can be quite technical about it and talk about, you know, it's a different way that the wires in the brain are, you know, put together. And I think that's kind of a nice way of describing it. Different can be good and bad. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that as well.
I think that sometimes I think in our effort to mitigate the harshness of dyslexia, we only speak about the really good points. But I think it's totally fine to say to a child, listen, I get that you're frustrated. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm not saying that I totally understand, because it's impossible for me to understand that. But I am here for you, and I'm here for you to complain, and I'm here for you to cry, and all those things are fine. What's not fine is that those things stop us from trying.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's the difference. You're allowed to cry, you're allowed a few hours to yourself, you're allowed to be mad, you're allowed to, you know, hit a slither up against a wall for a few minutes to get that frustration out. But what we don't do in this house is we don't give up. And I think, again, that's that building that resilience into your children, that they then learn very quickly that actually it's okay to have setbacks, but it's not okay to stop trying. And that's what's really important. And I think as well, like, that it's important to have age-appropriate conversations about dyslexia. And because of the age appropriateness of it, it's also important that the dyslexia conversation is always open. So, you know, you speak to a child who's 8 about dyslexia, their dyslexia will mean a different thing to them when they're 12 and getting ready to go to secondary school, and the fears that come with that, when they're getting ready for their junior cert, when they're getting ready for their leaving cert, when they're going to college, when they're changing jobs as an adult. All of the time, my dyslexia means different things to me, and it gives me different anxieties or different fears or different pride in the work that I've done. Like, it, you know, but it always has to be an open conversation, and saying that to them, listen, if you ever have any questions about dyslexia, I might not know the answers, but I'll find them out, and we'll talk about them, and we'll figure out a way. So, you know, not just explaining dyslexia and then that's the book closed. It should be an open conversation in your house. And I think as well, sometimes it's important to tell siblings in a way that is nice, because I think you've kind of spoken to parents about doing homework together and stuff like that. And
that can be quite challenging, especially if kids are quite close in age and the child with dyslexia is 1 or 2 years older than the child that doesn't have dyslexia. And so you can see on certain areas the older child is obviously, you know, better at some things, but then when it comes to maybe spelling or reading, the younger child is correcting the older child. In some, you know, cases, it might be good to be able to have homework in different areas, but then also it is important that, you know, you talk then to the younger child, or you talk to the whole family about dyslexia, what it is, what it means. It makes these things hard, but actually these things then can often be huge strengths. And
just the importance of kindness as well. And literally, like, I've seen parents have really good and actually, I think, really fruitful conversations for younger children as well, like teaching them really important lessons that actually sometimes some people find things hard, and we have to be kind, because you don't know the next time you find something hard, and your brother or sister will help you with that. So, you know, it's that we don't make fun of people because of this, and we're very kind because of this. And those things are really important, and they're an important boundary to set in your family as well. There will always be, like, bust ups with your kids. There will always be horrible moods. Emma has a million sisters,
yes.
so she knows about fighting.
Absolutely.
But I think that should be something that you're strict on, in that, listen, like, slag him off about he's a terrible footballer, but absolutely no one talks about his spelling. You're not, you know, it's not, and that's a kindness. It's maybe a basic line in the sand that you can draw, and again, it gives them that little bit of, I suppose, the protection that comes with knowing that home is their sanctuary. Yeah.
Amy, do you have any favourite books or kind of things that you like to show for parents to use for their kids to help? There's explain.
There is some good books out there, and again, like, some kind of different in terms of age appropriateness. So it's called Dyslexia. Is a good one, again, for kids kind of under 11 maybe. Tom's Special Talent is a really good one, again, probably for a similar age group, around 10. And then also, if you're getting a little bit older, kind of from 11 really onwards to like adulthood, because I've read it and I think it's very good, and that's called Dyslexia is My Superpower, and it's kind of stories gathered from all around the world, from adults and young people with dyslexia, just talking about their lives, and maybe adults speaking about what they've done and maybe the paths that they've taken to get to where they are now. And young people, there's 2 excerpts from people from Ireland. So again, they can identify with a young person and an adult from Ireland in that, but it's all around the world, and it gives a really nice kind of global perspective on the fact that, you know, dyslexia is not just you, it's not just in your school, it's not just in your county, it's not just in your country. It's something that people experience all around the world. And again, it's hard to feel alienated when you have the information that actually it's 1 in 10 people. If you are on a dart, like I often tell the kids with dyslexia and me, if you're on a dart with 30 people, you are like statistically very unlikely to be the only dyslexic person on that dart. And it's sometimes a nice thing for parents to remind kids, if they pass 20 cars on the way home, it's very likely another dyslexic person has passed them in a car. And again, I think it's a really nice reminder that we're not on our own, and that we have this lovely, wonderful, mixed kind of dyslexic tribe where everyone has their strengths, but everyone also can identify that some things are really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're my kind of books. Do you have any to add?
I like YouTube. So I have a few different.
Are you sure you're not dyslexic?
I have a couple of. I wish.
I know. Yeah, you'd be cool like us.
I have a couple of things I like that I found on YouTube. One is actually by the British Dyslexia Association.
Yes.
It's a short video called See Dyslexia Differently, and have a look at it yourself, and if you think it's age appropriate, I think it's a really good way to describe dyslexia, what it is and what it's not. There's another one that was recommended by a parent as well. It's a documentary, and it is on YouTube as well. It's a BBC documentary it's Cara Thornton. Is that how you pronounce her name? I don't know. She's EastEnders actress. Yeah. And so the documentary is about her and her dyslexia journey. And this parent, her child was maybe 10, 11, 12, and they sat down and watched it together. And it was a really, really lovely thing just for the child to be like, yeah, I do that too. And you know, for them to see that there are other people out there, and the fact that, as I said, Cara is an actress, and you know, it is kind of a nice way to kind of see it, you know, plays out in
it's also, I think, a lovely conversation starter, especially if your child is kind of 11, 12, and it's harder to kind of maybe broach things with them. Watching things and saying, do you ever feel like that? Or did anything in there where you like, oh, that's me? And, you know, and sometimes kids are much easier to open up when they're watching something like that, because they're a little bit like, oh, and you kind of get them at their first reaction. They don't have time to like of put on a brave face on it. I am going to link those videos actually. I'm going to put it in the comment section here so you guys can check them out. Emma's very handy with the old YouTube links now, I have to say. So I think like that's a nice kind of conversation starter with stuff.
the other thing as well, we also have our podcast as well. And I do think it's kind of nice for definitely the older age group, maybe teenagers, even adults. I would often recommend it to adults here. So we would interview various adults from various different backgrounds, and about their dyslexia, what it means to them and what it was like for them growing up. And so I think it's a nice way, it's another way of finding your tribe. So again, we can stick a link in the comments about that.
Yeah, we just have a question here kind of saying, what books do you recommend for adults? Do you have any books that you would recommend?
Recommend for parents?
Yeah, sorry, for parents.
I think that I do like the one that you had mentioned,
Dyslexia is my superpower.
Yeah, it's my superpower. Yeah. I do like that one. Let me have a think about that, and what I can do is have a look through my resources and pop a few into the comments.
Yeah, I think actually Dyslexia is my superpower is a really good one, because again, it doesn't overly focus on the positive, which I think is really important for a book, especially for a book for parents, because I think as a parent you are desperately trying to help your child, and while the really positive stuff is very important, is equally as important as some of the negative stuff, I think if, as somebody who isn't dyslexic, you're reading it, it often kind of teaches you that you shouldn't be too worried about dyslexia, that your feelings around dyslexia maybe are dramatic or kind of temporary or things like that. So again, like, it's really important to acknowledge some of the difficult stuff, because that's how our children are feeling sometimes, and that's important. So I like Dyslexia is my superpower, because again, it gives background on dyslexia, but also real life experiences of people, while also being kind of, I think, shamelessly positive. There's also that acknowledgement of the difficult stuff.
And there is a lot out there as well with regard to dyslexia, particularly at the adult audience. So what I would say is just to be wary about some of the books that are out there that maybe aren't, so things that maybe would be talking about dyslexia, that this is how you can cure it, this is how you can fix it. And so again, those are books that, you know, probably wouldn't be the best, but I'll have a look and I'll definitely pop a few in the comments then.
Great, thank you very much.
No problem. I think I did want us to mention our Dyslexia Me workshop as well. So do you want to give us a little bit of an intro about that?
Yeah, so Dyslexia and Me is a workshop that kind of focuses on dyslexia and self-esteem. It brings together dyslexic kind of young people in small groups, usually around kind of 20 to 25, and the age groups, the first age group is from 9 to 6th class, and then generally we say first class to transition year. So they're the two age groups, just to keep them kind of age appropriate. And we do really nice things, like we talk about our dyslexia, we do a positives and a negatives board, in terms of we put negative words we associate with our dyslexia, maybe things people have said to us, kind of generally the stuff that comes up is words like stupid, lazy, careless, bold, teacher's pet, faking, all that sort of stuff, and that comes up like really unanimously, like across the board. And then we try to focus on our positives. So we talk about all the positive words we associate with dyslexia, things like outside the box thinker, kind, funny, clever, innovative, entrepreneur, artistic, all the types of words maybe we associate with our own dyslexia. And then we fact check it, because we cannot allow fake news to overtake us. So we go through the things on the negative board and take them off that we know aren't true. So we know these kids aren't stupid. We know they're not faking their dyslexia, because dyslexia is a real thing and is not something that people fake. We take off lazy, because I've never met a lazy dyslexic child ever in my whole life. They're like a unicorn. I mean, I hear so much about them, but I've never actually met one. So, you know, things like that is really important. And it's something you could do at home with your children, where they have a positives board, and it's like good words about me, and it's just a big A4 sheet that they put on their wall, and that you try to add to once a week, and say, this week, what do you think is a word that describes you best? What did you do this week? What was fun about you? What was amazing about you this week? And even just putting them down, again, it's so you're trying to flood them with positivity, because sometimes unknowingly they're getting a lot of negative energy from school or from themselves. So you're just flooding them with all that like important information about themselves. So that's definitely something you could do at home. We talk a lot about whether we think people understand our dyslexia and that sort of stuff. And I think that's important too, because I think often it's the risk of having that one conversation about dyslexia and then it's put to bed. You know, and when it can be such an ongoing issue for young people and maybe, you know, they need to talk more about it. And then we do some resilience building. So we watch kind of cool videos about being like our best selves and running our own race. And then always their favorite thing is we do homework for the teacher. So we give the teacher homework. So because we run teacher courses here, and we have the opportunity to kind of speak to teachers about what would make life easier for kids with dyslexia in the classroom. And like, you know, we ask the young people that are at dyslexia and me to write 10 things that would make life easier for them. And it's really simple things. And actually sometimes it's like quite heartbreakingly simple.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Like things like don't give out to us if we get things wrong. Don't make us take homework. Don't make us take work home for homework that we don't get finished during the day. It's like,
or do
really,
it at
really
lunchtime. I mean, like all these things are totally out of the question and really, really inappropriate. So if you think about it, like your child's lunchtime is really important for their social development and their physical development. So if you find yourself in a situation where your child is, say, things that they can't take down from the board, they're having to do it at lunchtime, like that's out of the question. It's really inappropriate. And it's something that you need to speak to the school about, because again, you're impairing them in other ways. It's the same as doing homework. If your child is doing 2.5 hours of homework at 10 years of age, it's really inappropriate. And while other children are out playing and learning how to interact with each other and all that sort of stuff, your child is just inside. And honestly, after an hour, they're not taking anything in anyway. So it's important to maybe speak to a teacher actually and say, listen, what's the recommended homework time for my child's class? And when you're told that, saying to the teacher, okay, we'll be setting a timer for maybe 10 minutes longer than that. And like when we're done. Because they're not taking anything in and they need to have an evening. Like if you think about it, like I really think that dyslexic kids are the bravest kids like ever, because if I told you that you had to go in and do something you hated and were sometimes found really difficult for like 6 hours every single day, and people did not hesitate to tell you that you were not good at it, you know, every single day, 5 days a week, and then you had to go home and do 2 more hours of the hard stuff, you'd be like, oh, I'm grand, thanks so much. You'd find a new job.
Absolutely, yeah. One of our previous comments that came in there was just around the area of CBT, so cognitive behavioural therapy. So I think there was a parent that was talking about that they use cognitive behavioural therapy techniques. And I think kind of what we were saying is very much based on that idea that basically it's about changing your thought patterns and changing the way you think about something, which would then hopefully change the behaviour. So even just changing, as Amy and I were saying about the negative wording, the I can't do anything, finding something that, you know, they do enjoy and they do excel at, and using that then to say, well, no, actually, you're quite good at this, you're really good at that. And so again, changing their way of thinking. When they say that I'm stupid, again, whip out that report and say, well, no, actually, this report shows that you're dyslexic. It also shows that you're very, very bright. And again, challenging that negative thought patterns.
Yeah, and there are really nice things that can be done as well in terms of if your child has a little bit around, you know, maybe is a little younger and has anxiety about school and stuff like that. I've seen really nice things where parents draw like a little heart on the palm of their child's hand and tell their child like that this is like a hug button, and when they press the button they will have like a heart on their hand, and the parent will feel it and will send them good vibes and will be thinking about them and stuff like that. And again, it's just a tiny little bit of a connection for younger kids, especially if they're anxious and they feel very kind of stressed out. It's a nice little reminder that like you get to come home to a safe space, that you know, we're thinking about you all the time, we know this is hard. It's an acknowledgement sometimes actually, even just to say like, I know this is really difficult for you and I'm sorry, but it will be better and we're working on making it better.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I think that's kind of everything for the moment. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it is really, we'd like to kind of leave you on this thought that like your high expectations for your child coupled with all of the love and support and energy that you put into them is really the only deciding factor on how kind of happy and successful your child will be. No exam is worth your child's mental health. No homework is worth your relationship with your child. So sometimes we do have to say, that's not happening tonight. Sometimes we do have to say, listen, you know, your effort is as important as the output. You studied for 2 hours. So even if you get 2 out of 20 in this spelling test, like that's fine, because it's not what the result is, it's what the effort we put in. So I think sometimes when it's easy to get caught up in scores and all that sort of stuff, it's important to remember that it's easy to get into different careers. It's easy to kind of go back. There's millions of ways to do what you want to do, but your child's mental health and self-esteem is the most important thing to you as a parent, and it's really, really important to keep that in mind. So I think that's kind of what we'd like to leave you on. So we will put links to some videos, links to some good books in the comments. And thank you so much for joining us, spending your morning with us. So we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.